nations unite together, Lord God, in order to bring justice, Father, in a very wise ways. And Lord, it is in your hands. Although there are so many things that we can still do, Father, we need your wisdom because your wisdom is higher than ours. Your wisdom is true wisdom, Father, that is beyond our limited wisdom. So we ask you that you will guide us, you will inspire the hearts and minds of these key political leaders and the leaders of each sector of society, Lord God, throughout the world to do their part in order to bring peace, Lord, peace and restoration, Father, and may you stop this tragedy, Father, and let there be constant prayers that are lifted up to you, Father, by many of your children, by many people that know your heart, Lord. We know that you do not rejoice over when you see a tragedy, Lord. You are weeping with us, and Father, so we ask you that you will show your greater mercy, greater grace, Lord God, upon the people of Ukraine, and also your children who are actually watching and vicariously experiencing. Father, we dedicate this time in your hands, and may yourself be revealed even through the scriptures, and Lord, bless our learning. We thank you. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Okay, so we talked about lesson 1 and 2 last time. So lesson 3, we did part of this already last time because it was needed in order to explain the intellectual aspect of our holistic education. And if you remember, let's go back a little bit because it was a lot that we covered, right? On page 18, there's a chart that says the process of the information handling, right? Well, first of all, let's go back to one of the first charts that we saw. So on page 14, it's always good to review the very basic foundation, the big picture, because then we can build upon that. Then we can understand why we're doing the things that we do, right? So on page 14, as you can see, there is like an entire picture of holistic education. And even when we say holistic education, it does not cover every single thing that we are supposed to grow in. And yes, there's only so much we can do, right? But these are the very, very basic things that needs to be covered in a curriculum. So as you can see, there's a 25 faceted curriculum, and the first column, it says intelligence, right? So what are the 5 different aspects, 5 dimensions of the holistic education? One is intelligence, and probably I'm gonna say this like throughout the course because only when we understand this, we know why we are doing certain activities and certain exercises, right? So one is intelligence. Another is mind power. And then physical health. And strength. And then another is self-discipline. And then finally, interpersonal skills. And abilities. So obviously intelligence is what? Your intellectual capacity. The reason you're taking this, the courses that I'm teaching is because you already finished college. You already demonstrated a certain degree of intellectual capacity to be admitted to college and to pursue your majors and electives. And in the meantime, maybe some of you actually have internship experiences, which requires intelligence as well. And also you finish college and you manage to study, like GRE or ACT or any other, not ACT is college, right? GRE, and just apply by writing essays. Certain other types of schools actually require your portfolio, things like that. So you managed to graduate from college and also enter into master's program. And maybe this is your second master's, although I don't know for sure. So definitely you guys have intelligence. And that's one primary, one of the primarily important aspect of schooling. But that is not the only aspect, right? In order to be successful. So what is our what is the purpose of our holistic education? It's basically to raise other-centered leaders, right? Other-centered leaders and those who can maximize their capacity, maximize abilities. And also help other people maximize their abilities, right? So then, for these purposes, like how are you supposed? And also another aspect, key aspect was who understands the era. Other set of leaders, not just regular people, but leaders. And so, in order to do that, then yes, we do need to develop all 5 aspects of ourselves. And so after the intelligence, there's mind power. I see that most of you have a certain degree of mind power. Actually, all of you, because in order to apply for college, you should have gotten certain grades and certain experiences, throughout high school. And also, just throughout college, you need to exert certain effort. You needed to discipline yourself in order to, and that comes to this aspect, right? You were self-disciplined, and you were able to actually endure through 4 or 5 years. One of my former students actually said, he was doing a victory lap, which was the 5th year, because he, I guess, flunked one of the years. But obviously, you face many different circumstances. If you are living 4 or 5 years, even at a young age, you, some people actually go through a very smooth time, versus many others experience ups and downs. It could be relationship problems, it could be, something that happens to the family, or just financially difficult, or, something happens, right? And also, it's a young adulthood is a time when you start thinking about your own life, meaning of life. Why am I living? Where am I trying to find meaning of your life and find the direction for your life. And it's a tough season. So then you need to have mind power in order to withstand all the difficulties and obstacles, inner barriers, external barriers. But also, mind power is needed because in order to just simply pursue academic career, there are, depending on what kind of school you went to, if you went to a pretty competitive school, it becomes tougher, right? Even atmosphere-wise, one of my students actually said that she really struggled through in one of the very competitive programs, and because her roommates were studying so hard, and she just felt like, I am not diligent enough, and they were studying so much, like day and night, even at nighttime, you could, because you're living together, you can see that they're studying, and so she was really stressed out just because other people were studying. Yeah, so then how are you going to maintain your composure? Go at your own pace that is best for you, instead of like, okay, my roommates are staying up, so I'm gonna stay up tonight. So then you need to have certain willpower in order to battle with that too. Something happens and you just feel really down, and you don't feel like doing anything in those circumstances. You need to have the mind power. Other times you just feel like, oh, look at the world. The economy is falling apart, and there are not many jobs out there, and the things that I used to do are obsolete, and so then the future looks really bleak. In that situation, what are you going to do? You need to have some mind power in order to overcome your emotional difficulties and still move forward, right? In order to have a positive mindset. So one of the important things is that if you have a positive mindset, that you will have much easier time dealing with the difficulties that happen in your life, versus if you're pessimistic, if you are really negative in your attitude, then rather than the circumstances, because of your lacking mind power, basically, defeatism, pessimism, you will not be able to succeed unless you overcome that, and people are always changing, even in your old adulthood. If you really want to change, you will change, and especially the truth of God really helps us really see ourselves. It's like a mirror that reflects, that it illuminates our hearts, shows us what's in there. And sometimes, I'm surprised, oh, I didn't know that was in there. And also it gives us a standard. Bible means a measure, and it serves as a wonderful standard. It serves as a plumb line, so that when we are kind of off, off balance, when we are kind of not heading toward the right direction, it always shows us like, okay, so this is the way you should go, and you're a little bit off, or like you're drifting away, come back here. So that's one of the beauty of meditating on the passage of the Bible. Now, also physical health and strength. We talked about certain examples, right? Certain people are very, I sometimes work with LASD, and some of the students, like if they are both in similar conditions, with, struggling with learning disability, student A is relatively healthy. Student B is struggling with health, and which one do you think is more likely to succeed in the end, even academically? Student A, because the student A, for whatever reason, the parents actually provided an environment and good habits for the child to actually, regularly exercise, to, mom provided, I'm being stereotypical, it could be otherwise too, but mom providing healthy food, and this child, overall, if you have a positive mindset, you tend to be also healthy physically too. They're kind of interconnected. We kind of divide ourselves into different aspects, and we talk about them in order to analyze, but then they're not really separable, are they? We're walking around and my spirit is wonderful, but like my body, that could be true. My body is really struggling. Then it's going to somehow affect my spirit as well, to some degree. And with my power, of course, you can overcome, but it takes extra energy in order to do that, right? So they're interconnected, and that's why we want to have holistic education. And then self-discipline, we just talked about that. Once again, I commend you to have graduated from college, and you're still pursuing a further degree, and you want to learn. Some of you actually want to learn, and so I appreciate that, and that takes self-discipline. And I know that some of you are even married with children, and taking care of children takes a lot of energy and time, doesn't it? Although I don't have a personal experience, I've worked at a daycare center before as soon as I graduated from high school, and it was an eye-opening experience in that I was partnered with an older, experienced staff member. My partners, because there were 2 staff members, adults, in one room, and 8 infants. And I laughed because it was pretty hectic. When you have 8 infants that are, only one of them was 14 months old, others were under 12, and in various stages. Like a 6 weeks old, and 6 months old. And so like there are infants who were crawling, who couldn't move, who were walking and running around various stages, and there was not a single moment where you could sit down and take a rest, unless there's a definite break. Like this is your break, and go out and take 15-minute break and come back, right? Or this is your lunch break, and lunch break is even hectic because you, it was just, and then after everything was done, we all received at least 2 hours of module training, meaning you could start off as a person who knows just very basic, who has basic information about how to take care of children, but then you need to constantly learn and train. It takes everything in order to be in the daycare center. You would think that it doesn't take much ability, but yes, we do. We had to take exams one after another, constantly tested, and then sometimes this baby cries, that baby cries, everyone cries, right? And there are times when a sick child comes, and there was a period of time. So every member who joins in for the first time, every staff member, they were sick because there's so much sickness going on around among the infants, but also the toddlers. There are different classes, right? And so that was kind of tough. And in order for you to actually continue to come to work and to withstand 8 hours of work plus 2 hours of training, you need to have high power. And then definitely physical health and strength if you're dealing with children. And especially my room was full of infants, and you have to always lift them up, change diapers, clean the toys, just give them food, and play with them. It takes energy, right? And then self-discipline, definitely, because each child, you need to feed 8 of them, almost, they get hungry almost at the same time, right? Then which one are you gonna feed first, and how are you gonna make it really fast so that all 8 of them are holding something, holding a bottle of milk mostly. Others, with cereals, you need to feed them, etc. But I know that being a parent could be because you are not off after 10 hours, right? You go back home, and still it's 24/7. And once you have your children, one of my friends actually told me, no giving up, no giving up. And so I can understand how tough it can be for those of you who are taking care of children. Those of you who have gone through that stage and your kids are in college, congratulations, and awesome job. You know, that's one of the most important jobs in the society that is hardly recognized, right? And then interpersonal skills and abilities. I'm really I'm not really outgoing. You know, I'm a withdrawn person, and you know, it takes a lot of intentionality in order to approach people and talk to them. But I guess when you become a parent, right, for your children's sake, you become bold and courageous, and you have to speak up. I've been to different meetings that involve parents, and whoever they are, they all speak up somehow. I see that, like that mama bear's instinct rises, and they all speak up for their children's sake. So that kind of changes you. That's why one of my friends actually said, like, once you get married and have children, you will change. So I see that even to come to classes, of course right now it's online, but still it does take for you. You need to schedule yourself. You need to do something. If you have a little child, you got to do something, and then make time to sit before the screen and take the classes. So I want to encourage you, and I want to commend you for coming thus far. And my prayer goes out to you, especially during this season where we think that there was COVID before, and it looks like it's almost going away, but we don't know for sure. And then another thing happens, right, with Ukraine and all that. But you know what? Let's still be thankful. Let's still count the blessings. I was so thankful this morning that I have a room, I have a bed. One of my older friends, a friend of my mom too, actually texted this morning that he was in an airport in order to travel, because he is a wonderful artist, and his heart is so good. He is devoted, and he's devoted to God, but he doesn't have much money, and therefore he had to buy the cheapest air ticket, which I've done before. I've done something similar to that before. It was pretty tough to have a long hours of layover, basically. And actually, one of the people who sat next to me, she was very kind. Chinese young lady. She said, "So where are you going?" So I'm going to Korea, and she asked me a few different questions, and she was like, "Why are you on this flight?" Because the plane was full of people from Arabic countries, from China. Like hardly ever there was any Korean on that airplane. So she was asking me questions, and she was like, so I just explained the situation. Okay, so I needed to save money, and I just took the plane that was the cheapest, and I ended up in this transitional airplane. And she said, she looked straight into my eyes, and she said, "Time is money too." I remember that, and I was like, I know, this is difficult, but you know what? I did not have a choice, and that trip was really a blessing. Yeah, but anyway, so I understand what it is like to have a layover in a different country. But I mean, he was not in a different country, but he had a 12 hours of layover, and he had to. He couldn't stand or sit for 12 hours, right? Let alone, because he was already having a long flight, and so I guess he brought his sleeping bag or something like that to have that layover time, to stay in the airport. So yeah, following God is can be very difficult. It can be challenging, but there is joy, and you get to experience God's intervention. You know, when you're in need, when you have everything, then you may not experience God's hands because you don't have that space, you don't have that room. So anyway, this morning I was like, wow, you know, I'm in a comfortable bed, and I'm really thankful. You know, there are things that we need to be thankful for. So like when I tend to look, and when things are difficult, then we have a good reason to be thankful because then God comes and we can experience it closely. We come to know Him at a greater level. When we are in need and when God provides, we finally confess, God, you are El Shaddai. You are Jehovah Jireh. You know, when we have gone through a very tough season and through prayers we were able to break through, we see God's hands everywhere. We declare, you know, you are Jehovah Nissi. You are Jehovah Shebaot. You are the one who is the leader of the host of the army, and you come through faithfully. We come to know Him as a covenant partner. Oh, this is what you mean. I never knew that before. And in times of high, we can also appreciate God for bringing us up to that point, and to be able to be in a position to help other people, to guide other people. You know, okay, this is the path that I took. I make mistakes here and there. I give you advice so that you don't have to repeat the same mistakes, but you know, I advise that you take a different route. Things like that. I mean, through our ups and downs, we can thank God, and it's important to have that relationship with God, isn't it? It makes a world of difference. So those are the 5 aspects that we need to develop. And then on page 18, before we go on to talk about the passages, it says the process of the information handling, wisdom-oriented learning, and so the chart is divided into different sections, isn't it? Process, or that's how Canadians pronounce, right? Process, stages, goals, methods. So process, what kind of process is it, right? When it comes to information handling, what kind of process is it? And then, what kinds of stages do you have in that process? What is your goal? What are your goals? What are some of the methods that you utilize in order to achieve the goals? So in the first section, you see process, information obtained. So it can be obtained in various manners, right? You can actually read something, you can hear the news over the podcast or like radio. You can actually watch a TV, watch a news on the TV, or it could come from, you know, grapevine. You watched you know, like an informational video. It can be various sources, but anyway, there's information that you obtained, and so the stages are stage 1, increase the amount of information obtained. So like then, how are you going to maximize, like within the given time, how are you going to actually observe more? And then number 2, stage 2, raise the quality of information obtained. I know some of the language. I mean, this is Dr. One's language. That was I tried to translate you know, so that it will make sense to you, but then still there's a little bit of awkwardness because of the worldview differences. And he is a nuclear scientist, and his way of expressing things are sometimes like beyond our understanding, and he has a very different style of expressing himself or describing. So then just bear with us. Okay, so stage 1, increase the amount of information What is your goal? Speedy reading, read fast, and comprehension. So it's not just decoding, right? But read fast while you're comprehending fast. And then so what are some of the methods that you can utilize? Speedy comprehension and reading methods. And then stage 2, raise the quality of information obtained. Like, what do you mean by that? I mean, the quality isn't it already like determined? You would think so, but then you can raise the quality by achieving the goal of analyzing with accuracy and speed. So the method would be passage analysis. And then we're going to actually deal with this as well. Stage 3 is discerning between facts and feelings, discovering the hidden information. Yeah, so what is implied? What kind of impression that you get, right? That are not necessarily facts. And, even the history, which is supposed to be most subjective, is written by a certain author with certain perspective, certain worldview, certain emphasis, certain values, who sees the same scene and, come to the conclusion, oh, you know what, as a person of this kind of and that kind of background, I interpret the situation in this manner. You say this, oh, you have a different perspective, but you know what, I have a different perspective. So actually, we're going to have a very good example today regarding this. So what are the facts? What is implied? What kinds of feelings did this author bring in, while he or she is stating the facts? Okay. So discover the hidden information and the methods, passage, reflection. And then that was information obtained. It's obtaining, and then information process. So let's take a look at this. So first of all, you need to obtain the information. Process. And then it's presented. Obtained, processed, and presented. So then the next stage is processing. So it involves stage 4, 5, and 6. Stage 4 is systematic approach to information. So what do you mean by that? It means to see the whole picture, then turn it to the parts. So see the big picture first. As a leader, oftentimes, I tend to be detail-oriented and can miss the whole picture. But as leaders, we need to actually see the whole picture. Okay, so and sometimes I'm concerned about the big picture so much that I just leave the details to other people. That can happen, but it'll be the best if you can see the whole picture, then looking at the parts, right? So the leader needs to present the vision, sense of direction for the entire group, and actually that is the most important thing, isn't it? And then also pay attention to the details, but then that's like the next. So see the whole picture first, and then turn to the parts. Then what kinds of methods can you utilize? Aerial view learning, correlation learning method, and we're going to talk about these. Stage 5, deeper reflection on the concepts in the information. So we saw the whole picture, then we turn to the parts, and then we're conceptualizing the information. So what do you mean by conceptualization? It can sound really like sophisticated. It can sound really something big, but actually no. you're just utilizing your own way to kind of summarize what you've learned into just one sentence. Maybe what are some of the important concepts that you find in the passage, for example, if you're reading. Finding the important points, and then finding its meaning. What is it? What's the meaning of that summary, that concept? Okay, and then objective, subjective method of deeper reflection on the concepts. And stage 6 is conscious knowledge of the concepts. Then once you have processed your information, then the final stage is like internalizing. Okay, so I'm going to take this as what I believe in, and that part, not quite sure. It creates cognitive dissonance. It does not match what I have known. Then you have to wrestle with that. It takes a little bit of time, and then maybe in the future you'll get to actually accept that, adapt that as what you believe in. So you utilize questioning method, and then information presented. Okay, so now it has become yours. Like this piece of information I have conceptualized, I kind of know what it is, and I can actually present that. I want to actually disseminate this information among other people. I want to actually relay this information to other people. How are you going to do that? Because even if you know a lot, if you don't know how to present, then people are not going to be convinced, and they're not going to be able to benefit from your information. So stage 7-1, accurate presentation and writing. So I guess writing is always important. Even as you are verbally speaking, like I'm trying to teach and or an oral presentation, but it needed to be thought out and it had to be written. Well, I typed up, but it's a form of writing, right? So describe the information in your own words, because it has become yours now. However you understand, it might be slightly different than the original intention of the original writer. You don't have to be the same, because you're a different person of different backgrounds and different perspectives. Then you describe the information in your own words. So if you're writing, then you would call it 2D writing method. 2D meaning what? It's flat. 2D writing. Simple writing. Stage 7-2, hiding the treasure. 3D writing method. We're going to talk about a little bit of this, but yeah, for now, just try to demonstrate your information through writing. Then stage 7-3, applying freely, as practical writing, as comprehensive application method. So application is very important, because if you have just a piece of information, if you, especially if you're an adult, right? You all are adults, and we talked about adult learning and development before too. Like was it 2-3 quarters ago? We talked about this, that adults are different in that when they have obtained the information, if it's not relevant to your own life or to your career, or somehow it's personally relevant to you, you're gonna actually get rid of it, because you already have so much. From 12 years, 16, 20 years of education, you already have too much. And every day we're dealing with information overload, and therefore whatever is not relevant to you, like, you decide to forget. I think that's what happens, even unintentionally. So apply to your own life. And then stage 8, communicating through pictures and images. Yeah, so if you can actually, describe the information through a certain kind of image, that'd be a wonderful way to present, because then it kind of captures the most important idea. It conveys a lot, drawing conveys a lot. It doesn't have to be a drawing, it could be a picture, it could be a photo, it could be some kind of graphic presentation, but it conveys a lot. People get a lot from whatever seems to be very simple. So then you are kind of formulating, you're presenting in a formula. Okay? And then stage 9 is communicating via function. And once again, that one is a mathematical scientific person. So it says describing information via mathematical formula. There could be a function. What is a function? There's a certain elements, group X, and in order for group X to move to group Y, you have to go through a certain process. So if you can present your information in this manner, then you have mastered presentation. Yeah, so then I think before we talked about, we kind of skipped over page 19 and 20 last time, so let me just go over briefly. So obviously step 1 is speedy reading and comprehending. Step 2 is passage analysis method, right? Step 3 is distinguish between facts and feelings. Then step 4, have a whole picture, then look at the detailed parts. Step 5 is objective method and subjective method of reflection. And then step 6, internalize the information. And step 7 is describe or present accurately. So two-dimensional passages like essays and theses explain the facts and presents the evidence. So that's 2D writing. So then there's something called passage analysis or letter analysis, right? What do you mean by that? Ask these 5 questions, and we talked about this last time, right? What are the key paragraphs? What are the key ideas of the paragraph? How many paragraphs do you have? What are the key ideas of the paragraph? What is the form of writing? It could be a genre, right? But it could be a form. What is the subject and title? Yeah. So these are the questions that you can ask. How many paragraphs? Okay, number 2, what are the key ideas? What is a form? And then what is the subject or topic? And then what is the title? So a passage may already have a title, and you can kind of tell even by the title. When we read the newspaper, which I don't, but you can see the headline first, right? Then you can kind of see, oh, okay, so this article or this piece of news is going to talk about this. At least you know the subject, and you can kind of feel which direction this author is going, right? So by the title, you can kind of tell the entire thing. But say you don't have a title, so when you read certain articles, try not to look at necessarily the title, but come up with your own title, encounter. If you want to exercise this, if you want to practice this, then you can actually not look at the title, read through, and then go through this process and come up with your own title. And maybe you can compare with the original title. So then, we're going to talk about reading and comprehension once again, because last time we talked briefly about this, but let's take a look at a longer passage today. But before we go into talk about that, let's talk about today's passage. It's on page 22. I just wanted to do a little bit of review before we go on to Luke 13. Or let's take a look at Matthew 21 first. Matthew 21 first. As they approached Jerusalem and came to Bethphage on the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go to the village ahead of you, and at once you will find a donkey tied there, with her colt by her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, say that the Lord needs them, and he will send them right away." So I want to show you something. So then Jesus says to the 2 disciples, he always sends 2 by 2, right? Go to the village ahead of you, and you'll find a donkey tied in such and such place, and by her colt. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, say that the Lord needs them, and he will send them right away. It's kind of, sometimes Jesus does something very unique, something that we cannot quite comprehend, with our common sense, because he's moving by the divine plan. He sees the Father at work, Father God, doing something, moving towards a certain direction, and he follows. And that's why he probably saw that God the Father was preparing for his crucifixion. Before that, a triumphant entry into Jerusalem, in order to signify that he is the King of Kings, that he is the Messiah, prophesied Messiah. And so Jesus saw that, and then moves according to God's plan, and he says exactly what Father says, right? Go to a certain place and bring the donkey and a colt. As you can tell, that a donkey is kind of short-legged. A horse and a chariot might be more appropriate for a king, right? Whatever king you are. Even as a spiritual king like Jesus, it'll be more appropriate for you to be on a chariot or at least on a horse, right? but a donkey is kind of short-legged, and a donkey is kind of one of the more inexpensive ways to, one of the humble ways to actually utilize as your transportation. And a colt is little, you know. He looks cute, he or she, but at least, you know, a colt does not look magnificent, you know. A colt does not look, it does not look beautiful. It does not bring out like awe among the audience, right? So little colt, bring them here. And Jesus says, well, I'm going to be on a colt, by the way. This took place to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet. Say to daughter Zion, see, your king comes to you, gentle and riding on a donkey, and on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Yeah, so a foal is a female donkey, right? So a colt. And so what kind of prophecy are you referring to? So that's what I was looking for. It is in Zechariah 9. It says, rejoice greatly, daughter Zion, shout, daughter Jerusalem, see, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. So yes, it had been prophesied. So there's a slight difference between the original passage, Old Testament passage, and when it was quoted in the New Testament. The reason is because originally the Old Testament was written in Hebrew, and it was translated into Greek during the Greco-Roman rule, and because people wanted that to be translated. One of the emperors actually wanted it to be translated, and so there were 72 elders that got together to translate. And in translation, because of the language and worldview differences, there's slight change that happens. So then essentially it's talking about the same, but they're not exactly the same when they're translated to English, because one is from the Hebrew Bible, and English version actually came after Latin Vulgate and German Bibles, and versus when it was translated into Greek and then translated into English again in the New Testament, then it sounds a little bit different, but they actually mean the same, right? So, daughter Zion, what do you mean by that? People of God. Sometimes the Bible refers to a certain geographical names, and it means the people. Say, daughter Zion. Daughter Zion is people of Zion. Jerusalem. What do you mean by that? People of Jerusalem, right? Judah and Galilee. People of Judah and Galilee. So rejoice greatly, people of Zion, shout, daughter of Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, your king, righteous and victorious. He's victorious. When there are like expeditions, from a country, Roman Empire was a powerful empire, at least for a while, right? And it sent out expeditions, and people went out to conquer and increase the territory. And if they had a victory, then when the leaders, the generals or whoever, led the battle and won the battle, actually comes in through the Jerusalem gate, then comes to Rome, then what happens is people are waiting. People are waiting, and they're lined up, and with palm branches they would say, victory or whatever, right? They cheered, and actually actually this general or whoever the military leader was given this crown of glory. And so then the same picture is being shown here according to Matthew 21, triumphant king. And the original passage actually says, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious. So he is coming in as a victorious king who won the war. Now, but why is he on a colt? It looks even funny, like to just imagine it. I can feel embarrassed. You're like, oh, you know what? Jesus, couldn't you choose something better than a colt? But the reason he was doing that is because he was gentle and he was humble. He was showing that his kingdom is upside down kingdom. That whoever wants to be the greatest needs to be the least and a slave for all. And so he chose to be born in a horse barn, right? In a manger, and also he chose to. I think he might like donkeys. There's another donkey that comes out of the Old Testament who spoke. But anyway, so he was on a donkey to show that whatever looks magnificent on this earth, horses and chariots and gold and silver, people cheering, although people were cheering in this picture too, coming with mighty political power and physical power, military power, with a lot of money, perhaps. It's in vain that his values are very different. His kingdom values are very different. That whoever serves people, whoever loves people in a lowly position, are going to be rewarded greatly in heaven. And that's what kingly person would do. And he was demonstrating that. And what kind of king is it? Not someone who lords over other people, but lays down his life in order to save his subjects. And this is the kind of king that he is, that he wants all the believers to be, and therefore he was showing this as an example. A powerful, vivid image to be recorded in the Bible, to be passed down. This is the kind of life that you need to live. The disciples went and did as Jesus had instructed them. And see, although he's a humble king, whatever he says comes true. That's the kind of authority that he has. Even today, they brought the donkey and the colt and placed their cloaks on them for Jesus to sit on. So he didn't even have a saddle because, well, it's a colt anyways. And I believe that one of the passages describes that it was never ridden by anybody, right? So there's no saddle, but disciples actually put their cloaks so that Jesus could sit on it. A very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, while others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. It's like a humble form of receiving a king. And the crowds, did they really know who he was? Perhaps not. But they were acting prophetically according to God's plan. And sometimes not because we are so spiritual, or not because we're so spiritually sensitive and right on target, but rather because God is moving in certain direction, and while we're doing certain things, we may be fulfilling God's purpose. And that's what's happening among the crowds. So the crowds that went ahead of him and those who, that followed shouted, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest heaven. So according to what they shouted, they were right on target. Hosanna to the Son of David. What do you mean by Son of David? So the word son does not mean like your own offspring. No, it means the descendant. The descendant of David. David was a shepherd boy who came from a humble background. See, God does that a lot to demonstrate his own character. You know, he picks up the lowly. Well, number one, for the purpose that to show his purpose of showing his greatness. That I lift up anybody from the very bottom. Like I can use a servant. There are great spiritual leaders who came from a very, very humble background. There were some people who were born out of wedlock. There were some people who were largely condemned and or went unnoticed. These were great figures, and he uses those people to show who he is. I can do these things. If I lift up a person, I can lift up anybody. Like even if you are a daughter of a maid servant, I can use you. There was one great missionary to Korea who was born out of wedlock, and she was certainly despised because her mom was a maid servant. And anyway, so then, and she was abandoned even by that mom. She grew up as an orphan, but she became such a wonderful missionary and spiritual leader that impacted the entire Korean Christianity. We're discovering and rediscovering about her. But so this is what I can do. I am truly in charge, and whoever I pick, I'm gonna make him great. I'm gonna make her great. So David was one of them. He was a shepherd boy. He was the last child, and he was largely despised. Well, he was insignificant, so insignificant to the degree that his father, Jesse, when Prophet Nathan actually came to relay the message from God that in his own family will come a king, a great king, and therefore I came to anoint the future king. And Jesse actually calls for all the sons except David because, well, there's no need to bring him here. Let him just continue to watch over sheep because he is no candidate by any standard. So and then the rest of them actually came, and Eliab, the first son, was tall and good looking, and he had the visible charisma, and therefore even Prophet Nathan, as a spiritual man he is, he saw him and, oh, surely this is the next king. But God spoke to him, Nathan, no, I already abandoned him. And then he goes to the second son, surely this is the next king. Nope, I'm not pleased with him either. So he goes down, and then the last son in that room, and God still did not pick him. And so Nathan ends up asking, is there any other son that you have? And Jesse is like, are you serious? Look at Eliab, but pick Eliab, like why are you not picking him? So he says, oh wait, we have this insignificant boy who's dirty, smelly among the sheep, that we don't care much. He didn't say that, but that was implied. We'll bring him here. I mean, I think it's going to be a waste of time, but we'll do it. So he's called in, and David comes in, and God says, look, Nathan, that is my son that I chose. Anoint him. And so he does. David learned at least a couple of things in the field while he was doing such an unimportant chore that his probably older brothers didn't want to do, because older brothers wanted to do something more significant, like going to a war, bringing something unique, from a trade market or something like that, right? To please their parents. But David learned a couple of things. One thing was to worship God in the field. He might or might not have had an instrument. Maybe he had a harp, we don't know. But he just learned to sing praises to God. He learned to communicate with God, and he was so close to God, although he was only a shepherd boy, not recognized. And So, and he learned to obey God. He was in the Holy of the Holies in terms of the spiritual closeness to God. Even in the field where he was working, he was so close to God. And then number 2 is he learned to be brave and courageous. He learned to depend on God and become courageous. He later, you can tell by what he told King Saul. I learned to rescue my sheep from the mouth of a bear or a lion, and you actually don't go after a bear. you need to hide somewhere. Right? I don't recommend that you run after a lion to rescue your sheep. But no, don't go there, right? But somehow David had his loving heart for the sheep that he was tending, and not only that, he depended on God. Probably he cried out to God, Lord, I want to save my sheep. Please let me defeat this lion. And he went and actually took the sheep out of the lions. I can kind of see the angels were surrounding, in that scene, and the lion freezes, and he's like, a sheep is in his mouth, and he's like, I can't move. Like, what happened? Oh, look at this boy. Like, I'm gonna just get rid of him. I'm gonna just destroy him with my paws, right? But he's like, oh, I can't move. And then David comes, and with the angelic power, his mouth is open, and he's like, he freezes, and the sheep is intact. Maybe it has a little teeth marks, but then that's all. And then David rescues. So that happened, not just one time, probably several times. And so what David learned was, I am nobody. I mean, my family knows, I know that I'm nobody. But when God does something mighty, when I rely on God's power and His authority, then I can do anything. I can do all things. So that's the conclusion that he arrived at. And so when there was a war, there were many battles, but one of the battles was from the Philistines, and actually they had a giant called Goliath, and he was like 9 feet tall, and his sword was like 100 pounds or things like that. So and his armor you couldn't wear because they're so heavy. And he was a warrior from early on, from his childhood. So his name was great, and everyone just looking at his stature, people were just frightened. And so even to just hear his name, because he defeated all the enemies, he had a very good battle track record too. And so then he came out to holler, whoever your God is, that God is feeble, because look at you. You guys are like little bugs, little mice. Anyone who wants to dare to, pick a fight, you come out and I'll just kill you right off, right? And although their God was being dishonored, nobody could actually step out because they knew that if they did, they would be killed. Nobody could actually defeat him. So then at that time, David came because his father actually told him, okay, bring the cheese and bread to your older brothers who are in the battlefield. Check on them, bring a report to me how they're doing. So he went, and at that time this Goliath comes, and he shouts again, your God is so weak and so shamed. You have a shameful God, because look at you guys. You guys are like little bugs. You can't do anything. Come out to meet me. And at that time, David, because he had an intimate relationship with God, and he knew what kind of God he had, and his God was being, God's honor was at stake. So then he goes to King Saul. I came. Please send me out. And Saul is like, you're only a child, and Goliath is a grown up. And not only that, he has a very good track record. He's a warrior from early on, and you're gonna just lose your life. It'll be really embarrassing, and also like I don't want to bring grief to your family. But he goes, I've saved a sheep out of the lion's paws, bear's paws, the lion's mouth in the field, and I'll go ahead and actually strike him down. So please allow me. And so the King Saul says, okay, even your spirit is great. Like, I acknowledge that you're a brave soul. So go out and just meet him. Here's my sword, here's my armor. He goes, oh, these are too big for me, of course. I'm gonna just go out the way I am. So he just goes out with 5 smooth stones and a sling. And he goes by declaring, you come with a sword and spear, but I come in the name of mighty God, Jehovah. And he throws a sling stone, and it's 5 smooth stones. They can't do too much harm. Maybe it can break a little bit of bones, and that's it. But as he actually shoots that, it goes right in the forehead of Goliath, and he collapses. That's the power of God. It's not a human power. And he collapses, and David goes and just brings his head over to the Israelites' camp. And all the Philistines flee because they're like, who is this guy that just killed our leader who has zero defeat record? And so they all flee, and the Israelites actually go after them, and they just have this huge victory over them. And David was picked. Saul is like, okay, well, this is the greatest record that I've ever seen so far in my kingship, and I'm going to make it great. I'll give you my daughter and all that. So long story short, David goes through so much afterwards. He doesn't become a king very easily at all. But because he's a man after God's own heart, he honors God. His heart, although he goes through ups and downs, yes, he does make a lot of mistakes. But in his heart, he loves God. And that love does not change whether he was a shepherd boy or he became a king. He knew that he was humble. He knew who he was before God. He knew his status. Although people may cheer for him, and he might be living in a magnificent palace and all that, gold and silver, and he does become corrupt too. However, he knows deep in his heart, you know what? No matter what kind of splendor and glory that I enjoy in this world, even as the greatest king, and his name is so great, it is shown in the Bible. The Messiah, God chooses his Messiah to be born out as a descendant of David. That's how much he loves David. But he knows, the moment our relationship is broken, I'm nothing but the dust. But just because God loves me, he does this for me. And so I know who I am before him. And you know what? In fact, there's nothing else that I'd rather be doing. It's better to be in God's courtyard, in his presence just one day, than thousands elsewhere. And I'd rather stay. My desire, my true desire is to be in his temple and gaze on his beauty. That's the greatest desire that I have. And so his heart did not change throughout. And therefore, the Messiah comes as the descendant of David. Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. The Lord means God, who comes in the name of Yahweh. Hosanna in the highest heaven. Jesus entered Jerusalem. The whole city was stirred and asked, who is this? The crowds answered, this is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee. Right, they're off. It's not just a prophet. It was one of his roles, but no, he's the Messiah, right? So once again, through this passage, we come to know that God's kingdom is upside down kingdom. His values are very different than ours. And because Jesus is so solid in his identity as the Son of God, the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, it does not have to be on a chariot gold laden. No, he can be on a colt, even without a saddle, even without proper processional. He is the king. And also because he wants to show us we may be serving a great God, and but in this world, because the world hates. When I say the world, we're talking about Satan, the one who opposes God, and the followers of Satan. This world is so heavily affected by Satan, and he has set his own values. Because he was a proud angel. He's a fallen angel, right? What made him fall? His pride. His desire to become God, to take the place of God. And then that kind of value is all spread out in the world. Fame, money, status, the look on the outside, greed, power abuse. All these come from Satan, and they don't come from God. God is loving, is gentle, is humble, and these characteristics are not valued in the world. Like, say you're humble at workplace, if you're gentle at workplace, people may like you, but they may also step all over you. And so, because your values are very different, so then God is showing you'll be despised in this world. You'll be hated because you hated me. Satan hated me. He's going to hate you as well if you really try to follow me. But you know what? This life is short, but I'm in charge of all lives, including the everlasting life. When you have taken off your physical body, you're going to see what I mean by that. And so endure and withstand all the difficulties, because I have prepared a true crown of glory for you. Even if you lived a very difficult life on this earth, what I've prepared for you is great. So that is Matthew 21. Let's talk about passage comprehension, and if you have time, we're going to come back to Luke 13. So on page 24, so this is what Dr. Won has actually invented. If you look at the chart, it says the 5-minute quick comprehension and improving information ability. So first of all, do IPPL training. At first, we're not utilizing words and letters because it can be a little bit confusing. So let's start with the circles. So, we oftentimes, when we do a lot of reading, like we're sitting at a screen a lot. And so our IPPL movement may be less smooth compared to our former generation who did not have a computer, right? And so there's an intentional like a need to engage in intentional moving of the IPPL is what Dr. Won actually argues. So then consider that the connected, like the continuous circles are one sentence. So each chunk at a time. So try to glance over, from left to right, of course, and skip over the spaces and how many times, how many seconds did it take? Or conversely, you can actually time yourself for just 1 minute. You can set the timer and then try to go through every circle. How many times were you able to go through this from top to bottom and go back and redo? Like, okay, so 3 times in 1 minute, 2 times in 1 minute. Okay, so practice this a few times a day. It's going to take only 5 minutes, 5 minute quick comprehension time, or IQable training time. And then, so you would do this every day until you get really used to it. And you'll see yourself like improve in terms of how many times you can actually scan it per minute. And then you record your time to see if you have improved. And then another thing that, another method that the doctor wants to suggest is, okay, after you have done IQable movements, so the purpose, what is the purpose? To actually read it quickly, right? It's not just decoding, but while you're understanding the meaning. So then another means is to utilize slashes. Yeah, so utilize slashes by meaning unit, or word unit or meaning unit. I would say meaning unit because it could be several words before you put your first slash. It's a chunk, or it's a phrase that actually contains certain meaning. And then the next meaning starts. Then you actually, include that one meaning unit, and then put a slash at the end as well. For example, if you see the passage, I mean, we already took a look at this last time. Centuries ago, the Maya centuries ago. So it does not matter. Don't worry about the periods or commas and things like that. You just go through the passage as quickly as possible while you're actually chopping it by meaning. So centuries ago, that's one meaning, I think. The Maya of Central America, I think that's another meaning, produced elaborate, thickly cut carvings in stone, or it could be produced elaborate, deeply cut carvings in stone. The carvings would have required a cutting tool, a hard stone or metal, things like that. Iron ore deposits exist throughout Central America. This is just one way of doing it. I mean, you can utilize that. Maybe you can, you observe meaning units differently. But apparently, the Maya never developed the technology to use them. And the metals the Maya were known to have used, copper and gold, would not have been hard enough. Therefore, the Maya must have used stone tools to make these carvings, things like that. So like you kind of slash and divide up the passage into word units, or the meaning units. Right, then passage analysis method. How many key points does the given information passage have? How many points do you think? So last time we talked about this, right? How many key points? At least 3 key points, right? Oftentimes the first sentence and last sentence are very important, right? So the first sentence says, centuries ago, the Maya of Central America produced elaborate and deeply cut carvings in stone. So this is like talking about the fact. We're talking about Maya and their carvings, cut carvings. Maya and their cut carvings. That's the first sentence. And then last sentence is very important because it sounds like a conclusion, right? Therefore, the Maya must have used stone tools to make these carvings. Okay, so utilizing stone tools. I'm still doing this. Okay, so that's the last sentence. That's another point, right? And then what's in the middle? The carvings would have required a cutting tool of hard stone or metal. So we're talking about how the cut carvings came into place. The iron ore deposits, it says throughout Central America, but apparently the Maya never developed the technology to use them. So they did not use the iron, which would have been appropriate for stone cut carvings. But and then what did they use? Copper and gold. And so that's the middle. they did have a means, but they did not use that means, but they used like soft metal. So it's not the iron. Their argument is it's not the metal that they utilize. Then what is it that they utilize? They use stone tools in order to make carvings. So that's a conclusion. So at least 3 points, right? And then what is the summary of each key point? We just talked about that. What is the form of the letter? It provides quite a bit of information, but in a sense, it's argumentative, right? It's an argument. What they must have used, although we don't have any other evidences, but by just inference, we can tell that they must have used stone tools. And until this is true, until they find other evidences that indicate otherwise, right? So it's an argument passage, and right. So then what is the subject? Cut carvings, right? What is the title of the passage? You would say. I think we talked about this briefly last time. I would say the cut carvings of Mayan, or what kind of tool, the tools that were used for Mayan stone cut carvings could be the title of the passage. It's one of the options. I mean, you can come up with your own. And then let's go on to talk about a longer passage. Okay, so the longer passage is on page 30. Okay, so I go movement, and I will try to be fast, but for the sake of this class, I'm going to be slow. In the 1970s, two debates engaged many scholars of early United States history. One focused on the status of women, primarily white women, turning on the so-called Golden Age theory, which posited that during the 18th century colonial era, American women enjoyed a brief period of high status relative to their English contemporaries and to 19th century American women. This debate pitted scholars who believed women's lives deteriorated after 1800 against those who thought women's lives had been no better before 1800. At issue were the causes of women's subordination. Were these causes already in place when the English first settled North America, or did they emerge with the rise of 19th century industrial capitalism? The second debate, the so-called origins debate, concerned the emergence of racial slavery in the southern colonies. Was slavery the inevitable result of the deep-rooted racial prejudice of early British colonists, or did racial prejudice arise only after these planters instituted slave labor? Although these debates are parallel in some respects, key differences distinguish them. Whereas the debate over women's status revolved around implicit comparisons of colonial women to their counterparts in the antebellum period, thus inviting comment from scholars of both historical periods, the origins debate was primarily confined to a discussion about slavery in colonial America. Second, in contrast to the newness of the debate over women's status and its continued currency throughout the early 1980s, the debate over race and slavery, begun in the 1950s, had lost some of its urgency with the publication of Morgan's American Slavery, American Freedom, widely regarded as the last word on the subject. it continues on the next page. Each debate also assumed a different relationship to the groups whose histories it concerned. In its heyday, the Origins debate focused mainly on white attitudes toward Africans rather than on Africans themselves, with few exceptions such as Wood's Black Majority and Mullins' Flight and Rebellion, which were essentially concerned with enslaved African men. Most works pertaining to the Origins debate focused on the white architects, mostly male, of racial slavery. In contrast, although women's historians were interested in the institutions and ideologies contributing to women's subordination, they were equally concerned with documenting women's experiences. As in the Origins debate, however, early scholarship on colonial women defined its historical constituency narrowly. Women's historians focusing mainly on affluent white women. Over time, however, some initial differences between the approaches taken by scholars in the two fields faded. In the 1980s, historians of race and slavery in colonial America shifted their attention to enslaved people. Interest in African American culture grew, thereby bringing enslaved women more prominently into view. Historians of early American women moved in similar directions during the decade and began to consider the effect of racial difference on women's experience. So we see a few things going on in this passage, right? Okay, let me try to get rid of this. It's like a compare and contrast type of situation, right? So we're talking about two different groups. One is I'm going to turn to right. Okay, so there are different groups. So one is American women, okay, slaves, and then American women. Well, we know right off the bat that they are kind of connected because they all have to do with the human rights, right? And then the slaves, so then the commonality and differences. Commonality is they were both oppressed, right? They were and it had to do with their status and rights. And another commonality reality is that there were scholars who wanted to investigate into this matters, right? Research, scholars, research. It means there's a societal concern, right? And what they primarily looked at was what are the causes? They tried to look at the causes. So primarily, did it happen? Like discrimination against American women, did it take place as a result of Industrial Revolution? Did it actually create an atmosphere where women were put down? Or was there, were they second class already before 1800s? Also slavery, was there racism that was created as a result of bringing in slaves from Africa? Or was racism already in place before they came in, and it was only manifested and magnified as a result of slaves being transported? So what are the causes, the real causes? Was it already there, or did it happen later? And the difference is that when they did research, the researchers, scholars actually took a look at primarily, except those two articles or research studies that are actually named in this passage. Scholars most often looked at mostly looked at the white experiences. Like they looked at this issue of slavery and racial discrimination from the white perspective, white male perspective. Versus American women, they actually took a look at that they paid attention to the women's experience. Oppressed women's experience. And then lastly, there was merging, right? There was merging. Why was there merging? What was the merging about? So then later scholars actually changed their direction, and they started to take a look at the slaves' experiences, Black Americans' experiences. And also American women, they used to focus actually on affluent white women. Initially, but then later on, was it 1980s? And they started to take a look at paid attention to Black women's experience. So then there was a little bit of merging there. So basically this is how I analyzed. I don't know how you looked at it differently. You might have had a very different perspective, which is fine. And okay, then let's go through the analysis. So how many paragraphs are there? How many paragraphs are there? So it'll be helpful, like if you do slashing, and then when you see that there's one paragraph that is completed, and then the next paragraph starts, maybe you can put 2 slashes. So I would say in the 1970s, let's take a look at this again. Two debates engagement in scholars of early United States history. One focused on the status of women, primarily white women, turning on the so-called Golden Age theory, which posited, okay, so American women enjoyed, so the two debates engaged. One focused on the status of women, especially white women. Right, so then I would say two debates engaged is one section. And so one focus on the status of women, that's another paragraph. And then the second debate, which comes after line 10, the second debate, the so-called origins debate. That's the second paragraph, right? And then slave labor, 15th line, that's the end of the third paragraph. And the fourth paragraph starts, although these debates are parallel in some respects, two differences distinguish them. So they're talking about what were the two debates, and then they go on to talk about the similarity, the parallelism between the two debates. That's another paragraph, right? And then it ends right before second at the bottom, about line 23rd line-ish. There's where that comes out. Now, second, in contrast to the newness. That's another paragraph. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 already. And then line 29 says each debate also assumed. So that's another paragraph. That's paragraph 6. In contrast, line 36, although women, so there are some talking about some different relationship to the groups, whose historians it concerned. And then in contrast, that's another paragraph. That's 7. Over time, however, line 43-ish, that's another paragraph. So I would say at least 8 paragraphs. So what are the key ideas? I think we already talked about this. Two debates. What are some of the key ideas? Two debates. Okay. Two debates. One is women, and the other is racial discrimination. Around slavery. Okay. And then number 3, there are two debates, key points, right? And then other key points are here. So there are commonalities between the two debates, parallelism, and there are differences. The differences are scholars also looked at from what's perspective when it comes to slavery, but scholars who are concerned about American women paid attention to women's experience. But still, they focused on affluent white women's perspective. And finally, there was merging of those two debates because those people who were concerned about racial discrimination started to pay attention to Black American experience, and those who were concerned about American women's rights, they considered Black women's experience instead of just focusing on affluent white women, and therefore there was merging. So all these are points. Okay? Now, what is the form? It's informative largely because they're just stating the facts, right? So the form, I would say informative. And then what is the subject and topic? The two debates. True? And then what would be the title? Title, you can come up with a number of different titles, but perhaps you can say the debates on racial discrimination and American women's rights, colon, similarities and differences. That could be one. You can come up with a different, more succinct title yourself. So if you just analyze a passage in this manner, then your ability to actually read, because we talked about eye-Google movement and fast reading, and utilizing slashes in order to, according to the meaning units. And if you analyze the passages in this manner, if you just keep practicing, I think you're going to get faster and faster at it. And therefore, within a given time, because these days it's a time battle, right? Then you can actually obtain more information. So we're talking about stage one. Stage 1 and 2. How are you going to actually obtain the information as much as possible, and how are you going to actually process it? Yeah, I just utilize like a simple form of like a chart. This is not exactly a picture, but this is a beginning. And by doing that, you'll be able to actually analyze the passage and internalize faster. How is this relevant to you? How is this relevant to you, applicable to you? We are, well, first of all, we're part of the society. We're affected by this, and there's even if you don't belong to any of the categories, that affects you, right? The issues are relevant to you. How are you going to actually apply the information that you obtained to your own life? How are you going to actually present that to other people? And presentation, like you don't just talk about what you do. Oh, this is what I learned from today, so I'm going to just talk about. No, you have a purpose when you present certain material. There's a reason. Then the entire process can be shorter if you practice more and more in your speed. You become a little faster in your speed. Right. Then let's talk about Luke 13 in the remaining time. It's also on your booklet. Now there were some present at the time who told Jesus about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mixed with their sacrifices. Jesus answered, "Do you think that these Galileans were worse sinners than all the other Galileans because they suffered this way? I tell you, no. But unless you repent, you too will all perish. For those 18 who died when the Tower of Siloam fell on them, do you think they were more guilty than all the other living in Jerusalem? I tell you, no. But unless you repent, you too will all perish." Then he told this parable. A man had a fig tree growing in his vineyard, and he went to look for fruit on it, but did not find any. So he said to the man who took care of the vineyard, "For 3 years now, I've been coming to look for fruit on this fig tree, and haven't found any. Cut it down. Why should it use up the soil?" "Sir," the man replied, "leave it alone for 1 more year, and I'll dig around it and fertilize it. If it bears fruit next year, fine. If not, then cut it down." So what is the similarity? I believe that Jesus is utilizing a parable. So then a fig tree. Let's talk about the parable first. The fig tree was not bearing fruit. What is a fig tree for? It's for bearing fruit. It's supposed to yield fruit so that people can get the figs out of that, and that's why they planted the tree. But it was not yielding its fruit. It was not serving its purpose, and therefore the owner says, "Okay, cut it down. We don't need that. It's using up the soil. Like I don't need that. Instead, just dig it out and then plant another tree." But then the farmer actually says, probably a hired hand. He says, "For 3 years, okay, so sir, leave it alone for just 1 more year, and then I'm gonna actually fertilize it. Let's give it more nutrition, and see if there's anything wrong with the way we cultivate it. And then if it still does not bear fruit, then it's the tree. I'm gonna just dig it out next time." So God is giving us chances to bear fruit, and if we don't bear the fruit according to His plan, which is to bear the fruit of character, and to share the gospel, then we'll be cut down. So then, in the midst of all the things that are going on, we once again we go through like tough seasons, right? Where it's just hard enough to withstand, hard enough just to be there. However, in the midst of that, we need to really remember what the purpose is. Just like the fig tree, the fig tree is there to bear fruit, and we need to bear fruit according to God's will. We need to understand like what is our life purpose. It's not to literally. I understand some of you. I know. I feel for you. Some of my students have a very hectic life. I understand that they're squeezed in between schedules. Once again, those with families or elderly to take care of. Those people who have to go back and forth, between different countries. I understand that your schedule can be really hectic, and your life may not be really, like, maybe you don't have that much emotional space to be able to think about anything else than your own preservation, perhaps your survival. I understand that. But then in the midst of that, ultimately, what is really important, because the enemy comes to really distract us. The enemy comes to fill our minds with some other kinds of concerns. And therefore, like, our minds are really occupied and we can't think of the real purpose. And we need to be daily reminded by turning to the passage, turning to the scriptures, to remember our ultimate purpose. Okay. On a Sabbath, Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues, and a woman was there who had been crippled by a spirit for 18 years. She was bent over and could not straighten up at all. When Jesus saw her, he called her forward and said to her, "Woman, you're set free from your infirmity." Then he put his hands on her, and immediately she straightened up and praised God. Indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, the synagogue leader said to the people, "There are 6 days for work, so come and be healed on those days, not on the Sabbath." The Lord answered him, "You hypocrites, doesn't each of you on the Sabbath untie your ox or donkey from the stall and lead it out to give it water? Then should not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has kept bound for 18 long years, be set free on the Sabbath day from what bound her?" So, the synagogue leader, he is highly spiritual, right? He's respected, well respected among the people, but he has such a rigid understanding of the Word of God, the laws of God. When I say laws, I'm not talking about state laws, statutory laws. I'm talking about the religious laws, the commands of God that were broken down into different details. God gave us 10 commandments and some other laws, but then there are detailed laws, like what is it like to keep this law? And so then on Sabbath day, people were kept from working. You're not supposed to go beyond certain distance by walk. Certain things are considered as work, and don't do it. And so technically healing the sick on Sabbath, which is a day of rest when you're not supposed to be working, is considered as violation. But Jesus is not so concerned about the literal observation, but he's concerned about the spirit behind the laws. Like, why are the laws there? Why did God say rest on the Sabbath day? Keep it holy. What does he mean by that? Well, basically, we talked about this last time as well. Love God and love your neighbors. And what does loving God look like? What does honoring God on Sabbath day look like? What does loving your neighbor as yourself look like? Well, Jesus was doing just that, because this daughter has been suffering of being crippled, for 18 years. It's a long time. And she comes on Sabbath to be healed because she was so desperate. She could not wait for one more day. And she's your people. She's your neighbor. And how do you love your neighbor as yourself? Even on Sabbath, when you're not supposed to be working, well, because your God's daughter is suffering, I want to free her. And you say you violated the law, like to the sake, like, don't come on this day. No, God is at work. God's heart goes after them. What is honoring God on Sabbath like is to bring healing and setting people free. It may sound like a violation of the laws, but God's intention is to love people, and I'm loving people. And you guys, by the way, you say that you strictly observe your the laws of God, but don't you take your donkeys and ox, on Sabbath day to take them to the water to feed them? Like, it's you take good care of your livestock, but what about a person? Do you care about them? Like, and you tell them to come the next day. No, I'm gonna just heal them right now, is what he's saying. So he's honoring the spirit behind the laws rather than strict observance. When he said this, all his opponents were humiliated, but the people were delighted with all the wonderful things he was doing. And Jesus was hated. This was one primary reason he was taken into. The reason he was crucified is because he was blasphemous. He was breaking Sabbath. He was breaking the laws. And so, for the sake of setting us free, for the sake of loving us, he's willing to lay down his own life. That's the kind of king that we have. The king who lays down his life in order to save his people. And so we have a very different king than the earthly king, the king that we as Americans are allergic to, because this country actually was established as a result of the abuse of power by the earthly kings. But our God is humble and gentle, and he's loving. He's willing to lay down his own life. And so it's very inspiring to us. Let's close in prayer, shall we?